USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer, and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television, as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
Maybe you've heard the modified version of the Golden Rule. It says, he who has the gold makes the rules. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. You're going to want to stay tuned.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPowerAcademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I can tell you throughout the course of my life, I've heard some phrases, some little colloquialisms, some idioms, not idiisms. That'd be like the quotes of an idiot, but an idiom, idioms, axioms, quotes, quotable quotes, memorable phrases that honestly, they just kind of drive me up a wall. The sad part is a lot of them are like, well, they're like stereotypes. They became a stereotype because there's just a little bit of truth in them, or maybe a whole lot of truth in them. And the challenge is some of these quotable quotes, some of these idioms and axioms, these stereotypes, these phrases that just kind of run throughout society, we don't like them because they're true. And we don't like them because, well, they don't make us feel good. It's not something that you seek out and go, gee, I wonder if my life would be better if that verse, that quote, that statement, that policy were true. I remember having a conversation with a young man. He was 16 or 17 at the time. And he told me straight up, he said, one day I'm going to be the president. And when I'm the president, marijuana will be legal for everybody. And I thought, well, for somebody who's had 16 whole years of life, it's a good thing you can't run for president until you're at least in your 30s. I think 35 is the minimum age that you can be president. I've heard some people say, well, if that's when you're responsible enough to be the president, then maybe you shouldn't be able to vote until then. Because I know there are people that are 18 that are voting and they think a lot like that. They've never thought about the ramifications. They've never had to deal with someone who lost their life or made a huge mistake and changed the course of their life over a little weed. I watch a lot of cop videos. I don't know why the psychology of it fascinates me, but the number of times, again, that people get pulled over for a headlight or too much window tint or a turn signal out, and they find, one recently, 140 grams of marijuana in his car. And he's like, I got pulled over for a taillight. How can you be taking me to jail? He's like, well, because you were carrying around 140 grams of marijuana. That's not legal anywhere. That's dealer level distribution. You can't have that. But see, when you're 16, 17, 18 years old, you look at the things that feel good to you. And you think to yourself, if it feels good to me, if I want to do this, if I think through my vast amount of knowledge and experience in my vast amount of life at 16, 18, 20, 25 even years old, I don't see a problem with it. And therefore, it ought to be good. I mean, think back to Spicoli. I know some of you are old enough to remember that. If not, go look up Spicoli and just go to YouTube, type in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Nothing wrong with a little pizza on our time, because that was when he walked in, had a pizza ordered to the room, and he said, hey, it's your time, it's my time, it's our time. There's nothing wrong with a little pizza on our time. And his worldview, his philosophy, his policy-making ability, his decision-making ability was driven by his own attitude. How you feel about what you think and what you think about how you feel. And he felt like, I got the munchies. I want a pizza. There's nothing wrong with it. In my mind, in my imagination, in my thought process. Professor Hand, on the other hand, had a different view of that. He thought, nope, you're in my classroom on my time. That makes it my pizza. And suddenly, policy changed. And he, who was in charge, gets to make the rules. In another environment, that might be the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. Well, how do we know that's true? Look how much money is invested in political aspirations. These are not people who want to run for office. They're people who want to run the office. They're willing to spend the money to make sure that the person who's compliant with them will get into office and make policy that suits them. They're no different than the 16-year-old who says, I want pot to be legal for everybody. They have their own ambitions, they have their own goals, their own wants, their own dreams, their own desires. But they know that some of those things can't happen as long as a particular behavior or substance is against the law. And so their best endeavor is to figure out, well, who makes that law? Who makes that policy? How do they make it okay for me to get away with what I want to get away with? And then they invest in that politician to get in that office to make that policy. Just want a good social experiment on that. Between 2025 and 2026, we're 15 days into 2026 right now. And in New York, in the city of New York, where they have a new mayor, the price of buses has gone up, not to free like it was promised. The price of the subway has gone up, not to free like it promised. The cost of housing, in order to give free housing to people who can't afford a house, don't manage their credit, don't manage their cash flow, in order for them to get a house, if you're one of the people who said, I don't want my taxes to go up, I'm leaving New York, in order to put your house on the market, and I don't understand all the intricacies of this, but in a gross term, in order to put your house on the market, you have to give it 6 months minimum to sell. Meaning, even if you said, I'm going to put this property up, I'm leaving, I'm going to Florida, I'm going to Texas, I'm going to California, wherever I'm going, I want out now. You can't do that. You have to wait 6 months. And you have to give other people a chance to bid on the property, not necessarily at the price you want to sell it at. Policy has taken your property and said, you don't give us 6 months, we might decide that it's eminent domain. Policy has said you don't just get to sell, collect the money, and leave, because we're going to take even more taxes off of your sell, and we get to control who you sell it to when. What happened to private property rights? Oh, that's part of that frigidity of rugged individualism problem. All right. I know you're thinking you're meddling in politics. That's not your space. Let me tell you something. In this world that we live in, where there are humans who interact with each other, culture is a leadership issue. And when I say culture, I mean the culture in your house. Ask my boys, my sons, who are now well into their 20s, both of them significantly bigger than me physically. Ask them how often they yell at their mother. My oldest was about 5, the last time I recall him screaming at his mother. Because I don't tolerate that. My environment, my culture, my policies. It took some time. We still had our moments. It hasn't always been perfect. I raise my voice from time to time, but not in a disrespectful, dishonoring way. And we have no tolerance for that in our household. In our neighborhood, that's a little different. In our city, that's a little different, because that's not my environment to control. But I can still speak into that culture. Jason Aldean did a similar thing. Jason Aldean said, try that in a small town. It's just song lyrics. A lot of people got really upset about it. because his values, his culture, his principles are not the same for everybody. But I do find, having grown up in a small town most of my life, having lived in the big city of Dallas and Fort Worth and all around there, having been just outside of London while I was in the military, there are different cultures, different conversations, different ways of thinking, different ways of feeling in different kinds of cities. Buffalo, New York, Boston, Massachusetts. That is not Blanco, Texas. Blanco, Texas is a small town similar to the one that I live in. Their culture is different. The ways of thinking are different. It's very common that if you stop for a coffee shop and somebody's coming through the doorway, they're going to stop and open the door for you. They're going to hold it open for you. That's the value system they are built around. They're likely to say to you, yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. Oh my gosh, devastation. On the other hand, I personally watched in the big city of Grand Prairie, Texas, a few years ago, I watched my boys come out of the mall and walk over to me, and as they're coming out the door, they're holding the door for a couple of people to go in. And just as they get to me, we watch this old couple shuffling their way up there. When I say old, I mean they're probably in their late 80s. And he's racing her as fast as his little feet can carry him to try to get to the door, to open the door for her. And just as he reaches for the door handle, two young boys, probably 9 and 12 years old, come out the door, both of them staring at their phone, and nearly knock the old couple to the ground. And I thought, where are their parents? How can they have no respect for their elders? How can they have no respect for the people around them? They're just so engrossed in their phone, they couldn't care less. And before the old man can get a hold of the door, someone else comes out, slams the door back, again, nearly knocks the old man to the ground with the door. And it's the father of those two boys also staring at his phone. No situational awareness around him, couldn't care less about the old people. And so as the old man is recovering his balance by holding on to the door, my boys run to the door to hold the door open to let them get inside. And even then, while they're holding the door, people are flooding past with no regard for anybody else around them. No thank you for holding the door for me. No expectation of gratitude at all. Their attitude is, it's all about me. I'm going to get what I want out of life. I'm going to get mine. You get out the way. In a big city, that's a common culture. In certain neighborhoods, that is the culture. Or go into the barrio, into the neighborhoods where Latin families have built their own communities. And you're going to find a different kind of a culture. Get into the gang areas and you're going to find, if you diss me, 50 people are coming after you to get my respect back. It's a different kind of culture. Now, when you get into a corporate environment, oftentimes they'll say, well, we have a certain kind of culture here. Maybe you think back to Transformers. I think it's Transformers 2. When he takes the job, what is the guy's name that was Malkovich? Yeah, Malkovich. John Malkovich was the actor who was in charge of this company. And when the kid takes the job at the company, they have on one floor, everyone has red cups, red drinking cups, red pencil cups, red everything on that floor. On the next floor down, they're not red. No, everything is yellow. And if you take a yellow cup to the red floor, the leader loses his marbles. It's his culture. It's his environment. That's what he wants to see. Now, does it matter if that policy makes sense to anybody else? No. He doesn't care. It's about him. It's about what he wants. It's about him being in charge and in control. And in the movie, they depict that he loses his mind, I believe fires somebody because they've got the wrong colored cup on the wrong floor. It's a tragedy. It's a disaster when things don't go the way I want them to go. Maybe you've worked in a workplace like that. Maybe you've worked in a workplace where one person with no authority, I mean, they're not in a high-ranking position. Maybe they don't even have a title. But they've got an attitude that is off the charts, and it's bad. And every time they come through the door, everybody takes a deep breath and they're like, ah, this is going to be one of those days. Because whatever attitude they got off the elevator with, got out of the car in the parking lot with, rolled up into the parking lot with, that's the attitude that's going to take over the entire environment before lunchtime. You've been there. You've worked in sales. You may have been the salesperson that walked into a client's office and realized, ooh, I could cut the tension with a knife. There's an attitude already here. There's an atmosphere already here. The culture is palpable. Everybody's walking on eggshells. Everybody's terrified they're going to lose their job. That culture, that's the leader's job. The leader's the one who has to set the tone. Now, sometimes people write policies because they look really good on paper. They sounded great around the conference room. They got past the attorneys, and the attorneys went, yep, that'll keep us out of trouble. Risk mitigation, well accomplished. And yet, when the policies make it to the sales floor, or the policies make it to the production line, or the policies run into the customer, now all of a sudden you got a problem, because these policies that were meant to do good make the job near impossible. I was listening yesterday to a news reporter who said a family involved in a car accident filed a claim, $10,000 or so, to get their car repaired after the accident. And the company that wrote the policy, the insurance policy, denied the claim. We're like, well, we've been paying for insurance all this time. We've never missed a payment. We're not behind. It's all good. What do you mean you're denying the policy? And they said, well, you're claiming personal injury protection for people who are in the car, but we're not on the policy. Okay, I'm not an insurance salesman. I don't play one on TV. I don't have an insurance license in Texas. I got really close. I decided not to go that route. But if I'm not mistaken, personal injury protection is really about not just the people who are named on the policy, but anybody else that's in the vehicle. That's the reason you have PIP. So if you get in an accident and you're giving somebody a ride to work, or they're going to dinner with you, that their medical bills are covered, at least to some extent. I understood that was the purpose of PIP. But apparently in the state of Michigan, a legislator decided to save insurance companies money, and apparently to get them out of paying claims. The people who live in your household must be listed on your policy, even if they're not legal drivers. In fact, the kids that were in this car that caused the insurance company to deny the claim were 4. 4. The odds that my 4-year-old is driving my car, beyond slim. Why would I insure them as drivers on the car? Well, some kind of policy made at a conference table by intellectuals who don't have to actually enforce or execute these policies decided it would be good if everybody who could possibly ever be in that car was on the list. And if they're not, sorry, we deny the claim. Well, that's a problem. But let's go back to my opening statement. He who has the gold makes the rules. Nobody asked him if it made any sense. Nobody asked them if this was going to become as volatile as the red cup, yellow cup floor. Nobody asked them if this was going to impact the emotional center of the people who are carrying out this policy. I cannot imagine being the agent on the other end of that line, or the claim agent who comes and looks at the car and they're like, yep, I see the damage. I think we can fix this. Here's what it's going to cost. Oh, sorry. You didn't list your great-grandmother's cat on this policy. Claim denied. I can't imagine being that claim agent telling these people with their car destroyed that they're going to have to walk their kids back and forth to the grocery store because we're not paying for their car because they didn't list their goldfish. And now this is where the culture, the atmosphere extends beyond the conference table, extends beyond the workplace, it extends completely outside of your company, and it begins to impact the daily lives of people around you. Leaders are responsible for culture. Well, where does culture start? Yes, it starts in policy. It also starts in attitude. This series of the Leading Leaders podcast, we've been talking about the attitude hack and how those little tiny microscopic stories, news reports that take 90 seconds to tell. This family is out 10 grand. They have no car because they forgot to list their 4-year-old kids. Because who would have thought? They're not drivers. Why should I put them on the policy? That's a problem. But see, it's a story that points to a policy decision that drives the impact economically and culturally in a large swath of people. Now, from what I've heard in subsequent news interviews, in the state of Michigan, this is not an insurance company decision. In the state of Michigan, this is a Michigan state legislature policy. The policy tells every insurance carrier in the state that they got to list everybody. I don't know what happens when you take your pet to the vet. Does your dog have to be on the policy? And what happens if something happens on the way? I don't know that answer to the question, but I have to think deep in someone's imagination, someone had an idea somewhere that in their mind, like the 16-year-old who wants pot legal for everybody, in their mind, this was a phenomenal idea. It's going to save a lot of money. It's going to save a lot of lives. It's going to keep people from, I don't know, defrauding the government by replacing their goldfish Tom. I don't know what they thought they were going to do any more than I know what the 16-year-old thinks if he legalizes marijuana for everyone. But I can tell you that in your work environment, in your home environment, in the small town or the large city that you live in, as a leader, as an influencer, you have the responsibility of impacting culture. You can stop for 2.5 seconds and hold the door open for somebody else. You can say thank you and you're welcome and yes ma'am and no ma'am. You can simply decide to do that. The odds that anybody's going to push back are very, very slim. I mean, it's possible. Somebody could get upset. How dare you call me ma'am? I'm not a ma'am. I've had that conversation, believe it or not. I get it. But just to be polite to people, most people don't resist that. But as a leader, you have to choose that. And you choose that first in your own mind and imagination, in your own ideas. And you begin to express it in the things that you say to yourself and about others. And then it begins to show up in the phrases that you use in the conversations that you have. And then suddenly, when you interact with other people, how you feel about what you think and how you think about what you feel, all these things come into play. And the challenge for many of us is that happens unintentionally. We don't think about the impact that our thoughts and feelings have on others. What if we looked at let me just give you one positive attitude. There's 5 of them total. So we'll do a couple of them tomorrow, maybe a couple of them next week. And so here's one positive attitude. Here's the 5: cooperation, excellence, expectation, appreciation, and insuperable. Trust me, you're going to love insuperable. Feel free to go look it up right now. Not in a Spanish dictionary, in an English dictionary. You're probably going to have to go back to pre-1988 to get a good definition of insuperable, but feel free to look it up. Today I want to talk about cooperation. The attitude of cooperation is spoken like this: absolutely, we'll have it to you on time and under budget. Now, that's almost like it's my pleasure. It's more than the words. It implies something about the people. And it drives an attitude and a culture. Now, this isn't legislative policy. It shouldn't have to be executive policy handed down to everybody. If you're the team lead, you don't even have a name tag that says supervisor, but you operate with an attitude in your team, whether you're customer facing, customer service facing, or internal customers only. If your team holds the belief and speaks the words, and trust me, those are like a cycle. If you speak it, you will begin to believe it. As you begin to believe it, it'll be easier to speak it. And the more you speak it, the more you'll believe it. and eventually it will begin to impact your behavior. People do what people believe. People do what people see. People see and hear and do and believe, and that becomes a cycle. So if as the team lead, if as the influencer, you say things like, absolutely, we will have it to you on time and under budget, I'm making a little bit of a verbal commitment. If I'm also living up to that verbal commitment, if I'm also acting out the necessary steps for that to come true, then it's going to. And the more I do that, the more I make it a habit of saying, absolutely, I have a yes attitude, I have a yes energy. If you don't have that book, go get it. Yes Energy was written by Laurel Langmeyer, orange-colored book. You should grab it, read through it, understand what it means to say yes and figure out how later. It's a great philosophy. But if you believe that we can do this on time and under budget, I don't know how yet, but we will figure it out. That's the beginning of an attitude of cooperation. Here's another thing. The customer is always right, and sometimes the wrong customer is right. Now, I'm a big advocate of firing customers when they're not the right fit, when it's really hard to please them, when it's impossible to please them, when their expectations and what your company, your organization, or you yourself promise to deliver, when those things cannot be made the same, it may be time to part ways. But I can also tell you, in my life, in fact, the fact that I have a coaching business today exists because someone approached me and said, I want you to coach me to do that storytelling thing you do. And I said, I do corporate training and public speaking. I don't do coaching. And this woman would not take no for an answer. She hounded me until I agreed to meet with her on a regular basis to coach her. Now, ironically, that same client has fired me 4 times. And that same client hired me as the keynote speaker at an awards banquet just last May of 2025. Why? Because sometimes even the wrong customer is right. I didn't even want to be in the business she was hiring me for, and now it is the bulk of my business. I was wrong about where I needed to go with my business. And the wrong customer, the one I didn't want, she was right. I serve her now, and I serve her well, and I serve her with honor. And we don't even agree on basic worldview stuff. But I honor her, and I am thankful. I'm grateful. So the right customer is always right, and the wrong customer is sometimes right too. That's an attitude of cooperation. It doesn't mean you're happy about it. It doesn't even mean you like it. It doesn't even mean you agree. It just means you're willing to go along. As John Maxwell says, you got to get along to go along. And sometimes if you're going to move forward in your life, you're going to move to the next phase, you're going to grow your business, you're going to scale. You're going to impact your city, your culture, your county. If you're going to do that, you're not always going to be perfectly aligned with everybody around you. That doesn't mean you quit, doesn't mean you give up. It means you'll learn to cooperate, and cooperation sometimes requires compromise. Here's some of the impact that comes on the other side of confidence. On the other side of cooperation. The first impact is confidence. If I know that I'm going to do my very best, I'm going to deliver with excellence, not perfection, but excellence, and I'm going to try my hardest to make this work out for you, I can be confident in that. And it's going to give confidence to the people around you. If they know that you're going to do everything you can to make this work, you're not just going to get a bad attitude and walk away. You're not going to have an attitude of resignation and go, it's not my job. It's not my job description. Hey, thanks for playing, but no. That's not there. An attitude of cooperation says even if I have to compromise a little bit, I'm not going to give up my core values, but I'm going to do everything I can to make this work for you. That instills confidence in them, and it demonstrates confidence in you. It gives you room for assertiveness. To just straight up say, hey, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. Is there somewhere in the middle that makes you happy? And finally, it awards and rewards initiative. It rewards initiative because if you're willing to say, I've never done it that way before. I've never coached anyone before, but I'll try. That was 2012. Here we are 14 years later, and it's the bulk of my business. If you're willing to take the initiative to do something you've never done before, it will be rewarded. It awards initiative by saying, hey, I'm going to put this proposal, this idea, this problem, I'm just going to throw this on the table, and whoever takes it and runs with it, whoever's willing to jump up and do something that's never been done before, it's yours. It's yours. The Wright brothers had no pilot's license, but the world stood around and watched them and went, they might be onto something. And there was a season when the Concorde was actually flying before people wrote policies that impacted business, that impacted. Before that happened, you could actually get on a Concorde jet and go from New York to Paris over lunch. It wasn't a 15-hour flight. Maybe that day will come back. But initiative started with a guy jumping off the barn, trying to flap his arms like a bird and fly, because he believed he could fly. He had an attitude of cooperation that at least he and his brother dove into until they found a solution. When you have the right attitude, how I feel about what I think and how I think about what I feel, when you're willing to do what nobody else is willing to do, you can change the world. And sometimes those tiny little policies that seem like nothing have a massive impact. Let's just watch New York City over the next 90 days, and let's see what the attitude Mamdani brings into office, how that impacts the culture of the entire city of New York, the state of New York, and the people around them. I promise we'll be talking about the attitude of Zoran Mamdani for decades. It's true. We're still talking about the attitudes of Gavin Newsom and Rick Perry. These are people who worked their way to the top in politics and made huge impact. Is it good? Is it bad? That's for you to decide. But I promise you, if you start speaking the phrases that indicate your attitude, you can impact the culture around you as well. In your home, in your company, in your city, in your county, in your community, and around the world. I'm J. Lauren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at